What's up, everybody? Here we go. Round 2, Fantasy Cruncher Process Show. We're going to start first and foremost. Promo code on the screen right now, The Process, one word. If you are interested in Awesemo.com, if you are interested in trying out Fantasy Cruncher, if you use the promo code The Process when signing up, you'll get 7-day free trial to Awesemo.com, 7-day free trial to Fantasy Cruncher. You just have to make sure that you pick a Fantasy Cruncher package that we are offering. Otherwise, it's not included. It is an add-on. But what we're going to do today is take a look at how we would use Fantasy Cruncher to MME. This is not going to have a lot to do with like actual picks for today. It's more running the crunches and uploading your lineups to whether it's FanDuel or DraftKings. I'm going to do both. So I'm actually going to enter some DraftKings contests today after not having played on DK at all. Feel free to ask any questions throughout the time. I'm here. I'm happy to answer them. I'm going to try to go for about 45 minutes, but we'll see where we end up from a time perspective, how many people get in here. But, try to keep them relatively on target, about Fantasy Cruncher or MMEing in general. This should be fun. I've been looking forward to doing this again. So here we are. Move this window out of the way. Should be a good video. I know we get a lot of questions about how to use Fantasy Cruncher, how to upload to the sites, how to change your lineups when you already have them in there. So we're going to be able to tackle all of this. And it's the same process, whether it's, there's me using that process word, whether you're playing on FanDuel or DK. The clicks might be a little bit different, but getting everything from point A to point B is always going to be the same. So let's dive in straight from the beginning. I have FanDuel up in Fantasy Cruncher, completely empty right now, besides randomness and old stuff. I have DraftKings as well open. I have FanDuel open. I have DK open. I have my projections open on the Awesemo website. Easiest thing that I would be able to say to do right now, if you're going to be starting, if you're trying to get this information into Fantasy Cruncher, you need to take the projections from the website or from wherever you happen to be grabbing your projections. You need to get them into Fantasy Cruncher. Easiest way to do that is going to be through Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets. I'm going to open up a Google Sheet just so everybody can see this. Some people might not have Excel, but it's going to be the same process. And I want to make sure that I'm talking about it the correct way because it's an important part of it all. We get this question a lot. So what you're seeing now, just a blank Google Sheet. I'll do this for DraftKings to start. I'm just going to click the copy button. I'm on my projections. You can do the same thing for Andrew's projections. Just going to click copy. And then I'm going to paste it. Right away, you get everything you need. You don't need all of this information to upload it to Fantasy Cruncher. All you need, name, if you don't want to do anything else, name and projection. So what I'm going to do is hop over to Fantasy Cruncher. I'm going to head to upload data. I'm going to clear out all the other junk that I've already done. So it should just look like this when you open it. And I'm going to copy the entire name column. I'm going to paste it into the player name. And I'm going to copy the entire projection column, except for the header. I'm going to drop that in here as well. So right away, that is all you need to do if you're trying to do this. So now I've clicked upload projections, everything turns green, and you can see the projection column is now updated. So the process for whether you want to do this for 150 max or 20 max, it's all going to be the same theory. So I'm going to just 20 max the quarter tournament on DK as my example. So I set this down. I'm going to get into the quarter jukebox, 20 entries. So the first thing that I'm going to do is crunch out 20 entries for DraftKings. Let's not worry about who's in the lineups or the actual exposures. The more important part is just showing everybody how to get those lineups into DK. So let's crunch out 20. I'm going to change this number to 20, make sure that I'm using my projections. I already have exposures set, but what I'm going to do is change that right now to 100%. I want this to be completely what it would look like if you don't touch anything at all. 0 randomness, 100% exposure. I am going to set 4,900 or 49,500 as minimum salary. That's 99% of the max. No real reason to do that one way or the other. It's just what I'm doing for this video. I'm going to crunch out 20 lineups. Lots of James Harden, lots of Chris Paul, evidently. So I've got 20 lineups right now. Let's say that we want to get these into DK. I'm going to enter the 25-cent quarter jukebox. And I'm just going to throw a dummy lineup in here. Just filling it all out. And I'm going to click enter. Now what I want to do is bulk enter. I'm just putting in a dummy lineup. Doesn't really matter at all what is in your original lineup. So I've already got one of my 20 entrants in. I'm just going to change this to 19 and click submit. So now I have 20 entries in the quarter jukebox. It's all the exact same lineup. Making sure we don't have any messages here. Nope, I'm good. So now what we want to do is get that crunch into DraftKings. So the first thing I'm going to do is export this. So I'm heading back to Fantasy Cruncher now. You'll see the export lineup section. I'm going to click that button. I'm going to click the 7 p.m. slate because that's what we're looking for. And I'm going to save this as DK Crunch. Save it as anything you want. You just need to save the CSV somewhere. Just remember where you save it. We'll have that. Now I'm going to head back over here to lineups at the top of the screen. You'll see that I have 20 entrants of my garbage dummy lineup right now. What you'll want to do after that is go to edit entries. My recommendation here is to bookmark this sheet so you don't have to click on lineups. The lineup screen is a little slow. So if you just bookmark this particular link, you'll always have it. You just, drag it off of the top here. That could be your quick link to just get to this particular screen. And this is probably the part that slows everyone down and trips everybody up the most. So the first thing you need to do is download the template for your stuff. I don't have any other sports or anything active right now, so this is the only one. But right now you can see that I'm in NBA, Classic Style, and I have 20 entrants for the 7 o'clock slate. I'm going to download this. I'm going to save it as my DraftKings upload template. You could override this every day. I do the same thing with the FanDuel version, and we'll get to that in a little bit. I'm going to save this template. I'm going to open this up in Excel. Again, you can open this up in Google Sheets if need be. This is what you're going to see when you open it up. I'm going to shrink the screen a little bit. So on this side, it's simply a list of all of the players, their player IDs, their salary. You don't really have to do anything over here. The section that we're worried about is right here. And I'm going to expand these columns. I'm going to shrink these down a little bit. But this is what we're seeing. I have 20 entrants into the quarter jukebox. You can see the entry fee and the contest details, but they all have individual entry IDs. And you'll see we have all of the same lineup in every one of these entries. What we want to do is override those. So I saved my crunch earlier. I'm going to open my crunch. And you're going to see this looks very similar. It's a name and it's their DK player ID. It's 20 lines. So I'm going to just copy everything that came out of that crunch. And I'm just going to paste it over top of these lineups. So instead of having this dummy lineup, I now have everything that I just crunched. I'll save it. That's the only step. It's the only thing you have to do. It's really, really easy, oddly enough. Won't save that either. We'll head back to DraftKings. You're already on the same sheet that you need to be on. You just click Upload CSV. Go back to the folder that you were in. In this case, I'm looking for my DraftKings upload template. I'll click Open. And I have successfully uploaded 20 of my lineups. Just to show you what happened. Instead of having one lineup have 20 entries, you can now see one unique lineup for everything that I just uploaded. So now I have 20 individual lineups into the quarter. In and out, and that took, 5 minutes at best? Super simple. And this is just something you'll do over and over again if you run another crunch. You don't have to download the template, a new one each time. The only reason you would want to get a new template is if you enter more contests. But I can update my old template that I already have. So let's just say, for example, we go back to the Fantasy Cruncher portion of this, and we think like, okay, I don't really want to have 95% James Harden. I want to set that to 40% and then recrunch and update the lines. So I'm going to change James Harden's exposure to 40%. I'm going to crunch 20 more lineups. I'm going to export them same way that I did before. I'm going to just override my old DK crunch. And I'm going to reopen my upload template. So now you'll see that the upload template has all of our old crunch information in it. I'm going to open up our new crunch. Copy and paste it. So I'll copy here. And I will just completely paste over it. So now I'm not going to have 90% of James Harden any longer. I have whatever we just set it at, 40, I guess. Yeah, so you can see it here, 40. So I've overrode my old lineups. I'll close the template again, save, close my crunch. Don't need to save it. Same process. Now I'll head back over here. I'll go to edit entries. I will upload my CSV. And now I've overridden those lineups already. I've already just done it twice. And now I only have James Harden at 40%. Don't worry too much about the logistics of that. It's just simply, that's what we want to do. We want to change it. So I'm taking a look at Slack chat now. Can we tell FanDuel to export as player ID and name? Annoying extra step. When you CSV edit from FanDuel, you just get the player ID. Gotta get this win. I don't know what you mean. I mean, I understand what you're saying. So I'm getting a question in our premium Slack chat. You guys would be able to see that Slack if you were members. And if you use the process as the promo code, you can be members. You don't have to do what you're doing, though. Got to get this win. We'll touch on that on the FanDuel side of it, but I think that you're creating more work than you want to. But anyway, that's as simple as it is to want to MME. Now, you could have, if I reopen this template, you can have multiple different tournaments in here. If you want to use the same 20 on each one, you would just paste it a couple more times. For example, like this could all be a different tournament. We'll call it the NBA tournament. Just so people understand, this could be a full other 20 max. You know, let's say it's a $2 20 max. It would just look like this. You could either run the same 20 and copy it here and just upload again, or you can run a different 20. Either way, you're going to get there. The same process across the board. So that's how we would do this for DraftKings. Let's do it for FanDuel. DFN. You have to edit the output to add in the FanDuel template ID. Yeah, Dave, I don't know anything about that other tool. This is more of a fantasy cruncher show. DFS GOAT. Do I change randomness and uniques based on slate size? We can get into that a little bit. Right now, all of my randomness is tied to individual player randomness. I've only been using one unique and letting randomness deal with it. So let's do the FanDuel upload as well. And this one's going to come from a different viewpoint because I already have lineups entered. After I do the FanDuel upload, we can take some more questions about, specifics in Fantasy Cruncher. So as I said, I'm already entered into the tournaments. If I head to upcoming right now, we're going to see a big list of dummy lineups, which is what I've entered already so far today. Just a big laundry list. But we want to do the same thing. There's a CSV edit here. I'm going to download a CSV template. Same exact process here. I'm just going to override my FanDuel upload template. Click yes. We're going to head over to Fantasy Cruncher. I'm going to copy my projections. I already have this set up as a macro in my sheet, so this will just automatically copy everything that I have. I'm going to head to upload data. And I'm going to upload my stuff. Now, I'm going to play 150 lineups on FanDuel. I have 150 in the fadeaway right now. So that is what I'll use. I have more than 150 individual entries for today, but I am not going to be using more than 150 lineups. I will use the same lineup more than once. So I'm going to crunch 150. Now, this one already has my individual exposures changed slightly. It has some randomness. Not the point of this call right now. Or call. Not the point of this show right now. Let's crunch out 150 lineups. I've got the FanDuel template open as well. You'll see that this is very similarly structured. This right section doesn't need to be touched at all. It's all the standards for that day, pricing, individual player IDs, etc. Again, it's going to be very similar over here. We have contest ID, the name of the tournament that you're in, and then your entire lineups. So I have 150 right at the top here for the fadeaway. This will be an easy paste, so we'll see that now. I've got my 150. I'm going to export. I'm going to save it as FanDuel Crunch, same way that I normally do. I'm going to open up that crunch. 150 lineups. So I select all of them, copy, I paste. So now I have 150 unique lineups into the fadeaway. What I'm also going to do is enter those lineups into some of these qualifiers that I've also, or satellites that I've also registered for. So since they're already in the order that I would like, I'm just going to paste that again. I've got too many in here now. I have less than 150 additional. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete them all. But now I've got 150 unique lineups in the fadeaway. And then I've doubled up on the first 74 to go into qualifiers for some other tournaments. But now I have this completely filled. I'll save it. Close my crunch. And then I'll head back to FanDuel. Same spot as before. CSV edit. I'll choose my template. I'll upload. And there we go. I have now run 150 lineups. They're all unique. They've been appropriated to the correct tournaments. And I have successfully mass entered on both DraftKings and FanDuel. And we have been live for 19 minutes and 57 seconds. It's really, really, really easy once you get used to it. It's mostly just copy and paste. There's only one or two spots where you can even put the information. Use this as a reference, circle back to it as much as you need to, but this should help you at least physically be able to do it. Now, there are many steps after that with regards to adjusting people's ownership, and I think that's what we could talk about a little bit now. But the actual process of entering the tournaments and updating your CSVs. I mean, I update the CSV on FanDuel multiple times in that final hour. Crunching, uploading. I'll crunch. If I think that news is steady, I'll make sure to get one in even before I think I've finalized my exposures, just to make sure that I don't have anybody like that should be out. But right now, I would be very happy with this. I still want to make my changes to it manually, but for right now, I know that everybody that is here is supposed to be here. Let me take a look at the Slack chat right now because we got a couple questions. There's a question from 2S Sabotage. Sabotage. I get it, I guess. If I've limited my player pool to avoid players I don't want and my exposure is too low somewhere because I'm unable to create 150 unique lineups, is there a way to find out what position I need to increase my exposure to? Yeah, sort of. It's a little bit easier on FanDuel to think about it, but you know for a fact that you need all of your exposures to total up more than 200% since you need to play 2 at each position. You're going to also need some wiggle room because it's not going to calculate all the lineups to the T. So there's no real right or wrong answer, but total up your exposures. If you have 204% of exposure for shooting guard, you're probably too low. If you've got 400, you're going to be fine. Hope that makes some sense. Bro says, when switching teams on Fantasy Cruncher, do you ever have the issue of Fantasy Cruncher not making the change and still displaying the team you were looking at, even though it doesn't match up with what team is now selected? I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. Dave, good question here. So if there are any changes from news, do I rerun Fantasy Cruncher or manually edit in FanDuel itself? I will always recrunch. Always. Unless I'm at the, like, if it's 6:58 and we get news that Larry Nance is out, the most likely scenario for me on FanDuel is that I'm going to quick player replace Larry Nance out for one random person. Or not random, but like one specific person, because I'm running out of time. John Adams has a great point in the YouTube chat. Doesn't Fantasy Cruncher put its export files in the correct format so you can upload them directly? They do, but it's only relevant for the first time you do it. So if you wake up in the morning and run this 150 FanDuel crunch, you can go to the quarter inch or whatever you want to enter for 150. You can export this and immediately upload that file directly to one tournament. But you can't do that after you need to edit everything, because then you need to edit for a specific tournament, and Fantasy Cruncher doesn't know what you're already in. But you can start your day by crunching out 150 and putting in 150 unique placeholders. That is also something I do from time to time. It's really just, it doesn't matter all that much. On a day where I think I'm going to be home all day, I usually just go with a dummy. If I don't think I'm going to be home all day, I'll throw in 150 unique lineups just in case. There's a question, can I guide on how to MME for 2-game slates on FanDuel, settings and exposure? That'll be another show. What are my thoughts on using global exposure as opposed to creating individual exposures for a player? So I do that. I set everything right now to, for FanDuel at least, 65%, and then 15% for anyone under $4,000 in salary. Totally relatively arbitrary numbers, but it gives me a good starting point. But in the NBA in particular, ownership is so important, at least to me, that I want to be editing exposure individually more often than not. Now, you can set up a formula where you set your individual exposure cap to be some sort of multiple of whatever the public exposure is. So if someone is at 10%, it automatically sets their exposure at, 30 or 35 or 40, whatever multiple you want that to be. That will probably help a little bit. T McBee, that's my biggest takeaway. I have to not worry about a full recrunch replace. I've been trying to refine down to the wire, but when you hit tech difficulties like yesterday, you get stuck. Goal from now is to upload the full slate 30 minutes before lock, then recrunch and replace from there. Yeah, that would be my recommendation. At some point in time in that 6 to 6:30 window, you want to put in something that you like that can be fine for you. Get in a crunch of 150 unique lineups. Worry about your exposures elsewhere, but like make sure that you got it in there and that no one that you know is out is in your lineup. Bruce Jr., I responded to your message on the YouTube. Happy to have you, man. I'm glad you're here. If we have any other questions, I'm happy to try to tackle them. I can hang out for like another easy 20 minutes to talk about Fantasy Cruncher. So let's do that. Let's go a little bit deeper now. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about FanDuel, but understand that most of this is relevant to both. I just happen to play more FanDuel. So as I mentioned, and since DFS Goat asked about uniques and randomness, I'll show you my settings. They're very simple. I have changed this max for 3 per team. I would set my salary at $59,400 on FanDuel. That's 99% of the 60,000 cap. If you want to go to 98% and go down to $58,800, I think that's perfectly reasonable. I just don't generally want to leave that much salary on the table. Cupper in our premium Slack chat. Will I help legalize the lineup today? That might not be the worst idea. So I make sure that I turn randomness on, but I don't set it here. And I leave this as 1 unique. I'm using enough randomness that I don't need to use it any more than that. So you'll see that everybody here has a unique amount of randomness. Kemba's is at 14.6%. Chris Paul at 15.1%. Jamal Murray at 20%. This is all coming out of my model, so I don't mind talking about it. There's just not a lot of thing to talk about. What you're seeing on the screen right now are rates per possession for how often someone does a particular stat. So, this is how Russell Westbrook averages 0.135 assists per possession. But what I do have here are standard deviations. And this is the standard deviation of the amount of fantasy points that this particular person scores on a per possession basis. So Russell Westbrook is at 0.11, AD 0.14. I take those standard deviations, apply them to the game for a particular set of inputs. So in this case, minutes and game pace. And I get a game standard deviation. So we can look at Kent Bazemore right now. Using that rate that I just showed from that previous table, I project Kent Bazemore to have 30 fantasy points on the dot with a standard deviation of just under 8. So I'm using that as my sort of range of outcomes for Kent Bazemore. I turn that 8 fantasy points of 30 into a percentage to use as my randomness. So guys that have higher standard deviations will have higher wiggle room. Since I'm playing GPPs only, I want guys that have some more variance. Guys like Jamal Murray who could have, a 20% range on this number. So everyone gets an individual randomness calculation, and I don't have to enter any of this manually. It's already in my Excel sheet. So that gives me a projection and some wiggle room. Dana Forden in the chat says, how do I get my standard deviations? I have a SQL database of all of the box scores for the past 5-6 years, something along those lines. And it's literally just the standard deviation of how many fantasy points each player has scored game by game. It gives a little bit of recency bias to games that are happening now. A box score from 5 years ago isn't all that important, but it's still in there. So it's all happening in my database. That would be like a 10th level course for this, I guess. But it's something that you can, manually calculate. If you grab just a sea of game logs, you can do fantasy points per minute and check the standard deviation across an entire season. So because I use so much randomness, generally in like the 10 to 25% range, I don't have to set any uniques higher than 1. I'm getting enough unique combinations already. By upping that unique number, I think I would be spreading my my player pool too thin. Ooh, Karis LeVert, only a dislocated ankle. Not that that's important right now, but didn't look good for him. So I crunched those 150. You'll see that I got Jordan Clarkson 65% of the time, Nick Batum 65, Chris Paul 65, Nance 65, Len 65. I'm taking a pretty big stand on some guys. I could conceivably bump those numbers up a little bit on a 3-game slate. But I got 40 players in my player pool. I don't have a number that I ever look for. So some people ask, how big should your player pool be? Not something I pay attention to. It just is what it is. I guess we'll take that next little step for these next 15 minutes. I'm going to export this, and I'm going to pop it into my sheet so I could talk about the ways that I would start to adjust some of this information. And I think the perfect place to start would be with Alex Len. I got 64% Alex Len on my first crunch. Thanks, the baller. I love this shirt hat combo too. I got 64% Alex Len on my first crunch, and we are projecting him to be owned at 14% on FanDuel. Now, there is no right or wrong way to do this. If you want to be 4 times the field on Alex Len here, you can do that. All this is going to be is a discussion about variance and how much risk you are willing to take on a particular slate. I would like to think that I'm probably somewhere in the middle for all of this. So I would not keep 64% Alex Len when the public is at 14. I would probably go to something in the neighborhood of 40. So 28% Alex Len would be doubling the field. To triple the field, that would take me to 42%. So I'm going to go ahead and change Alex Len to 40%. I still get a lot of leverage over the field, but I don't need that much to make my day go crazy. There's nothing to say that you can't do 64. There's nothing to say that that can't be 100. It is my particular risk profile. I'm looking to get a couple additional bites at the apple. And I don't think the difference between 64% Alex Len and 40% isn't that huge. But to be at 14%, it's different. I want to be able to be better than the field most times because I think Alex Len should be owned more than this. But I don't need to cripple myself if it goes wrong. I would do this process for just about everyone. I would work my way through the entire player pool. Sometimes I just simply sort my list and take a look individually at projections and make my changes from the top down. So in this case, not going to touch Harden or Durant or Paul, Jokic. Everything is fine there. The first outlier that I see is Alex Len at 64% with our projection at 14. So I've brought Len down. I'll probably do 2 or 3 more, and then I'll recrunch to see how it redistributes. Because taking Len from 65%, that's Chris Paul. Taking Len from 64% down to 40, that's 24% of my center exposure that needs to be reappropriated somewhere else. Things are going to look a little bit different. So we've changed Len. I don't really think I need to change Clarkson or Nance or Batum right now. Next guy up would be Amari Spellman. This is going to be a similar case. Len is at 14% and 64. I'm probably going to put Spellman at 40 as well. 17% expected ownership. Luckily, I'm already over here in Atlanta. I'll drop Spellman down to 40. Now, I will say this much. I'm more likely to use more of Spellman or more of any low-price guy, particularly on FanDuel, because you can drop low scores. Spellman is still in the kind of range where it won't kill you if you drop a 4,400. I'll do 1 or 2 more. Like Gary Clark, for example. I got 29% and we're projecting 2. That's just unnecessary risk for someone right now. So I would go ahead and go down to Houston. I'd find Gary Clark. Now this one's going to be a little bit different because relatively speaking, if you want to go 3 times the field, you're at 6%. I'm okay to go a little bit more than that. So in a vacuum, this is going to look like I'm being a little bit more aggressive, but I'm going to set Gary Clark to 12%. It's arbitrary. I'm not linking that to anything. It's just where I'm comfortable being right now. So now that I've got all 3 of those things in, I'm going to just recrunch. I recopy my data. It's got my updated exposures. I head back to FanDuel. I go to upload data. I clear out all my old crap. I paste in my new crap. And we upload. Let's go ahead and do 150. And while that crunches, I'm going to hit a question from Dave in our Slack chat. It says, what's the most, in this case, exposure you would have for a player such as Nance tonight? He's at 65% ownership right now. Seems crazy to go anything more than 40 to 50. Every night's going to be a little bit different. On a short slate, I don't mind it as much. And I'm way more likely to be aggressive with lower salary guys than high salary guys. So I don't have any problem using 65% Larry Nance if his ownership is at 65% here. Particularly because I'm getting him there. If I can get him there and the public is there, I will take a closer look to see, are there any guys in his price range that I am missing on? And it doesn't really matter which position it is, although on a short slate it's kind of more important. But if I go to Nance on FanDuel, we've got Nance here at 5,900. First and foremost, if I look at it by position, Larry Nance is at 5,900. The alternative, and this is something that Laffy and I talked about, the alternative really is either going up a little bit to Paul Millsap or fully dropping down. There's not really anyone else in his area that projects as well as he does. if I had options, like in theory, I would probably want to get a little bit more Paul Millsap. If this went to 15% Paul Millsap and I was with the field and I was slightly under on Nance, I wouldn't have a huge issue there. But it's really just, I don't mind going with chalk if there's no other place to go naturally. So I've got my new 150 lineups. I'm going to paste those in, override my old crunch, refresh my sheet. And now we'll see that I only got 40% Alex Len. I've now increased exposure to Cody Zeller. I've got quite a bit more Clint Capella. Gary Clark is now down to 12%. But you'll see that this changed everything now. Now I've got a lot of PJ Tucker. And you just want to, at least me personally, I like to go through this process from top to bottom of guys that I like to make sure that I have their exposure set, and then I'll take whatever I get coming out of the opposite side. So I would just do this over and over again. Sometimes you don't have to do it as much because there's not as much ambiguity in the data, but eventually you just stop. You don't have to make any changes any longer. But for right now, I would probably keep this. I don't see a ton of stuff that I would need to change that is crazy outlier exposure. But you want to make sure that you're putting your hand on everybody. You can't just crunch it and go, or you're going to probably be incredibly unsuccessful. DX Row, I don't know how else I'm supposed to say that, but in the YouTube chat, if you're not smart enough for all that deviation mess, how can I set randomness as a whole? And does it screw it up at all if you set all players to the same randomness? No, nothing screws up. Look, there's no right or wrong way to do this. The only thing that I can show you guys is the way that I do it. If you want to set randomness as a whole, you can do it in one of two spots. You can change it here. So I can set this randomness to 20%, click change all players, and you'll see that the randomness column now changed to 20. Or you can click this drop down. I can change all the randomness to whatever you want, 50%, and it'll change it all there. Randomness is as simple as this. It's going to pick a range in between. Let's say that Kevin Durant's projection is 50 points and I have randomness at 50. Every single lineup that Fantasy Cruncher calculates is then going to give Kevin Durant a score somewhere in the range of 25 to 75. Since I'm using 50% randomness, it's 50% of whatever your projection is. So in this case, that would be 25 fantasy points. He would be projected anywhere between 25 and 75. I don't think there's any problem using a standard amount of randomness across the top. You just want to remember that the more randomness you use, the less you need to use unique players because it will naturally create unique lineups for you. And vice versa. The more uniques you run, the less randomness you use. There's a question, how do you late swap on DK? I would do it all manually for right now. That's part of the reason that I don't play on DraftKings, so I don't have to do that. But I would be manually changing all of I would be at my lineup screen, and I would be just doing swap players. If you have time, you would edit Excel sheets individually, and that is definitely another show. Can I run a crunch for us with Nance as the anchor? I'm not entirely sure why that would matter. Anybody have any other questions in terms of MMEing? We get a lot like, how would your process be different for 150 compared to 20 compared to 5 max? Honestly, it wouldn't be all that different. I would still be doing the same sort of thing. You just need to take different stances. So like if you were doing, let's say you did a 5 max, I would probably set my exposure cap to 80% so that I didn't have anybody in all 5. I would go to 4 or 5. I feel like all these touts only give you enough to keep you hopeful so they can keep taking your money. For example, use Cruncher, right? Okay, cool. Well, we don't know what good randomness settings are. It's not that we don't know what good randomness settings are. It's that every single decision you make on a decision tree to do this affects everything else. I can't say just use 5% because I don't know anything else you're doing. I told you what my individual randomness number are. It's the standard deviation of a player's scoring. I went ahead and bought a scraper. I taught myself how to build a SQL database. I had no skill set for this whatsoever. Never used a database before. I bought a scraper on Fiverr. I built a database of all box score stats. I learned how to code it so that I can calculate a standard deviation for this information. And I learned how to put it in Excel. No one taught me. No one told me to do any of that stuff. I just did it. If I would have heard someone say it, I probably would have got there 2 years before I did it. It's fantastic. Aaron Borchard, you know I'll answer your question. Hit me with it. Can I show my entries again? They will not look anything like this by the time we get there. How do I come up with ownership caps? Most of it, at least in basketball, is just set so that I don't get outliers that I really don't want. This could conceivably be 80 and 20 for me every day. Really, our projected ownership is what is setting my ownership caps. It's not really anything. You could really leave it on 100. I just don't do it so that my first crunch looks functionally fine for us when we're in when I'm in my shows, because it's not going to help me at all if I get 100% of Gary Clark on my first crunch. It's just not what it's going to be. 65 is arbitrary. It's just where I ended up. It could easily be 80. You just want to set it somewhere so that you're going to max out on guys to know that you can switch it then later. So what's a good rule of thumb to set unique lineups and randomness for different size slates? There isn't one. Again, if you increase unique lineups, you'll want to use less randomness. If you increase randomness, you'll want to decrease unique lineups. Each one of those things run sort of in opposite directions for each other. You can use them both in tandem. You just need to know what it creates. So here, we'll just look at it right now. I'm going to set exposure to 100. I'm going to leave randomness on at 50. This is something I did in my previous Fantasy Cruncher video. But if I set this to 100 at 50% ownership, I'm still only getting people at 50%. Just because of randomness. It's only at one unique lineup. If I set this to 3 now, how many players did we have here? We had 51 in this player pool. We have 50 here. It's all every little thing is going to change. If I drop this randomness now to 0 and just take the projections on face value, 3 uniques. Now we're getting guys up here in the 90%, 80%, 80%. Whereas on the previous crunch, everybody was down in the 50s. You need to find out what your risk tolerance is for entering mass tournaments. If you're comfortable with playing 88% Chris Paul, maybe a lower randomness number is better for you. If you are looking to be maybe 2 to 3 times the field on any one player, you probably want to make sure that your exposure doesn't creep much north of 50. Every individual player is different. Every sport is different. Basketball is uniquely set up that it's not a problem to have 80% of a guy if it's, who would be a good example today? Let's just say Jordan Clarkson was $3,700 today. You can have 80% of Jordan Clarkson simply because he's essentially guaranteed to hit value for you. It's not the same as baseball where someone might go 0 for 5 and you need to naturally limit your exposure. There are some guys you just want to have more of so that you can spend more on other positions that have higher upsides. That's all. Dave says, I spent hours last night learning how to dive into this the right way. People need to invest the time. It's the number one thing that I have learned over probably the past 2 years. That time is key to all of this. There is no way to just click this and do it. It's not 5 years ago anymore. You really have to work and understand how your lineups are being built and why they're being built that way. Do I have any other questions? Cam Birch, can I help someone who doesn't own Fantasy Cruncher? I don't know what to help you with. This is a Fantasy Cruncher video. On a 3-game slate, do you try to act like a blowout won't happen in any game? I don't. I just treat it like every game is different. Some are going to have a blowout, some won't. I might take a deeper look at wholesale exposures, but I don't plan for it if I'm playing 150 lineups. Aaron Borchard. So the standard deviation you use for all players is fantasy points per minute. Yeah, it is the standard deviation of their fantasy points per minute. Yes. Let's see what else we got. I think we're good. I think that's probably it. We were able to crunch out lineups, upload the CSVs to both DraftKings and FanDuel, and, we can edit our individual exposures. Does anybody have if anybody has any thoughts as to what they would like to see in a future video? I'm going to be doing these pretty regularly, probably 2 a week moving forward. Feel free to drop comments in the comment section or email me directly, josh@awesemo.com. Always looking for additional topics and things to dive into, so feel free to list those. Oh, here's a good one, and then we'll get out of here. Dave asks, is it almost required now on FanDuel to set up a Fantasy Cruncher group for low-dollar punts? I keep getting burned by having a player with 25 to 30 points getting dropped. That one is probably just tough luck. And Dave, let's be clear here. You're not getting burned on anything. You've been dropping in baller screenshots for like the past week and a half. Anyway, I think that you can do that. I don't see any real problem. It's going to be more important on a bigger slate when there are multiple options. I actually haven't been doing that. I've just been allowing my crunches to force those people in, and then I'll make sure that I have enough of particular guys. But there is nothing to stop you. I did create I could show it in my sheet. I have a tab called groups, and this filters down. This is everybody that I have projected that is at $4,000 or below. So I will immediately go here to see if we have anybody that's projected to get a lot of ownership that I'm not getting, or vice versa, just to see who the best punts would be. I think that's it, everybody. I want to thank everybody for joining me. I previously did a video on how to use Fantasy Cruncher. I think this would be a perfect accompaniment to that video. So check that out. All of the videos are going to be here on our YouTube channel. Again, promo code is the process. If you want to try out our stuff, my projections, Andrew's projections, all of the information that we have at awesemo.com, you can do that by using the code the process. 7-day free trial. If you're trying to use Fantasy Cruncher, please make sure that you select a package that includes Fantasy Cruncher. Otherwise, it will not be included in the trial. But 7 free days to try this out. Watch the video. Go back and try it out. That's all I've got, everybody. Again, please drop your questions either in the comments section for this video or email me, josh@awesemo.com. I'm always happy to answer any questions. And then those of you that are already premium members, that trial will also give you access to our Slack channel. And hitting up or answering questions in our Slack is, that's what we're here for. It's what all the staff is here for. We've got a really good group of people. So come check that stuff out. Best of luck, everybody. Oh, Aaron, where do you get your box score data? Yeah, I got it all from Basketball Reference. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining me. I will be doing more of these shows in the near future, so stay tuned. And best of luck in your DFSing. Have a good one.